I'm going to jump right in this. My issue is stalked by a cultist, fighting back and recovering. It is amazing how much more stalking, harassment is going on these days. I think the internet plays a great big role in that. I mean, bullying has always been there, but this is kind of like really high tech, several notches above bullying, when you're being stalked, harassed, death threatened, that sort of thing, your reputation smeared all over the internet, things like that. My background comes from, really, it is domestic violence that has started from my early childhood by my older brothers, one in particular who is now a cult leader. He is what our attorneys have called a limited purpose public figure. When you get yourself out there and you're advertising yourself with so-called ministries, he does some business scams too, that you are at that point a public figure. And a limited purpose, but it's still a public figure. And so this is my experience. Much of what my notes are going to be covering are things that I have learned by experience. I have experienced these things. So I'm going to jump right in there with it. If you don't have these, I will have them up on my blog next week. Again, fightingforjusticebook.com, and you'll see like an area where it has my blog and everything. So, most leaders and followers of cults or high demand groups never bother stalking. We're talking about those extreme personalities. They're very aggressive and they really get into control. They are addicted to control, and they will use any means possible to continue that control. Whether you are a member of the group, you could be an investigative journalist and report on the group, or you could be a family member. As in my case, you can be a neighbor. There are these home churches or home groups that meet together, and they literally will pack a neighborhood with you'll have 50 vehicles outside every single week or several times throughout the week. And these are the types of people where the neighbors may start complaining, and then those neighbors end up becoming the target of retribution by these extremely aggressive, basically cult or high demand groups. It's just something that is becoming more and more prevalent. And I think it is directly parallel to the fact that we really don't have a good court system. We really don't have we really have a virtually no mental health system. Our mental health system is virtually gone. And again, even police, because they recognize that the courts just really don't enforce written law, that they're very helpless in doing anything about it. We have actually heard from police officers who say, I wish we could do something, but if the judges would just do their jobs, it would make our jobs a lot easier. So it is on the rise, whether you're dealing with a high demand cultic type or spiritual or self-help group, or just in general, stalking is increasing incrementally. The greater the mental instability of the cult leader and the cult's followers, the greater likelihood that these groups' leaders and their followers will stalk, harass, and possibly death threaten those people they deem enemies. That's a common word you'll hear, enemies or outsiders. The tactics used by stalking cult leaders and their followers is like online trolling, defamation, death threats, and attacks against the credibility and reputation of those people the cult leader and the cult's followers target for the purpose of public shaming and alienating from others. They'll oftentimes set up websites. In the case of my brother, he set up dozens of websites, smearing me and several of our other family members and former friends that he had, co-workers, you name it, the whole gamut of people. Anybody he targeted, he set up websites about them. And we ended up getting many of them off because they violated terms of service, but it was like whack-a-mole. I mean, they just kept popping up. They'll also set up fake identities on different social media sites. And in many cases, they'll even try to pretend to be you so that they can make you look really bad. And it's not you. Social media sites are, again, notorious for not enforcing their own terms of service. And unfortunately, it has taken attorneys to get involved, sometimes states' attorneys general to get involved to try to crack down on these social media sites. There are actually now lawsuits. Europe has actually been a little bit better because they've gone after these social media sites because they have not enforced terms of service. They have actually had people up there who are truly endangering, like children, human trafficking, that kind of thing. And so Europe is a little bit a step ahead of us with enforcing the laws. Harassment of your neighbors, harassment of everybody connected to you, your employer. These are the tactics my brother used to go after our employers, to harass our employers, to harass our neighbors, to harass our friends, every which way he could. Things like, oh, they're wanted criminals. Oh, they're domestic terrorists. Oh, they're child abusers. I had to actually carry in with my job as an educator. Here I am working with children, and I had to carry in a letter, first of all, from the Department of Families and Children and Families, a letter that said they have no record of me, of ever any complaints, nothing. And here he's calling me a convicted child abuser. And I carry that letter with me every day into my job where I'm teaching, because I never knew if a student maybe Googled my name or a parent did, or I told a lot of my coworkers about it, not everyone, and my bosses, the administrators of the school. And also, too, I carried with me an arrest warrant I had against my brother for harassment. He lived in another state. They weren't going to extradite him for a misdemeanor harassment, but it clearly cited that he was posting up all kinds of defamatory statements about me online. So those kinds of things helped me. But they will do whatever they can. Again, many of them are severely mentally ill. If they're being supported by their followers, they've got a lot of money and a lot of time to do this kind of stuff. I would also look out for things like tracking devices. I have been reading increasingly more over the years about how these cheap and easy little tracking devices can be placed on your vehicle and you don't even know it. And these are being used by stalkers to follow your every movement. So you need to be aware of the tech savviness of these cultists, these high demand groups. They can also weaponize the law enforcement against you by filing false charges against you. I had that happen with my brother. Fortunately, the police recognized right off the bat. And again, I kind of anticipated that he would do that based upon what he had done to his ex-wife. So I took action immediately to report every single incident. That's why I got the harassment arrest warrant against him. But they will weaponize law enforcement. They'll file false complaints against you, and you have to be right on your toes to know what to do about that. In short, what these people do is they declare all-out war on you. And you have to learn to be that soldier on the front lines and anticipate and strategize in your mind and keep ahead of them, at least try to keep ahead of what are they going to do next? You know, if I were that mentally unstable, what would I do? You know, I mean, you have to, it's crazy. It sounds like that, but you have to think like the criminal. I've actually talked to police officers and detectives, and they said, what helps us do our job right is we have to think like the criminal. And so you have to think like the person who has declared war on you. You have to think, you know, I mean, not two extremes, because you could really work yourself into a paranoid frenzy. You don't want to do that. You want to have balance in your life, and you want to think to yourself, what might they do next? And you have to be ready for that and say, well, okay, here's how I can prepare for their next line of attack. So fighting back. The intention of aggressive stalking cultists is to terrorize their targets into silence and submission to the point of mental breakdown or even suicide. And I mean, I have talked with people who have struggled with this. I know I was speaking to someone earlier who's also going through something very similar to what I've been going through, is that you get those fleeting moments of, you know, I just wish I could just die, you know, and then you tell yourself, that's what they want me to do. I'm not going to do that. And you get that stamina, you get that strength of mind to say, you know what? I have value and purpose in this life, and I am going to choose life, and I'm going to choose to be strong. And, you know, I was also explaining, in my case, my brother sued me 9 times. 2 of those lawsuits were joined in by my 3 other mentally unstable brothers. They all have police records. They all have mental health records for involuntary treatment. It's a genetic nightmare. because there are other family members in previous generations who exhibited this. I have really good family members. It's not like everybody in my family's like this, but it is a genetic crapshoot. And that, unfortunately, my parents had 4 children who right from the get-go showed signs of severe mental instability. It would be no different than any other genetic disease. Yes, they have choices. Yes, they know what they're doing in many cases. But it is something that this family, my family, has struggled with, has had to deal with for a long time. I don't have any mental health records. I've never been arrested. I've never committed violence against people. But these are things that my brothers have. And my parents were not abusive toward each other. And I explained that, what are the origins of this? And I can look back over previous generations of family members who exhibited the same kind of personalities. And yet, again, we have really good people in our family, really productive citizens. And yet this is something that can happen in any family. But these 4 brothers, led by the ringleader of my brothers, who's the cult leader, 2 of their lawsuits out of the 9 had to do with trying to exhume my mother from her grave and take possession of her body. That's how outrageous it was. Our court system allows this kind of nonsense, and we are working with our legislators and we worked with judges to say, this has to stop. Nobody should be able to weaponize the court system with completely meritless, outrageous claims like this. And so there have been some progress in some states, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. So the tactics, again, of how do you fight back? You want to document everything. You don't want to minimize this, say, oh, well, maybe I'm just overreacting. Well, maybe I'll just go away. And if you turn around and like contort yourself to put your head up your backside, it's going to snap back at you. You need to document everything. It really is happening. It really is a violation of your basic human rights to exist and speak the truth. Whether you've been in a cult and you've gotten out, or whether you're like myself, targeted by a cultist, you document everything. You don't retaliate against these people, because you're going to only make yourself look worse. And it's going to validate to the police when they file false complaints against you that, oh, well, they did such and such a thing that, was a violation of the law. You want to be like completely without means of giving them anything to build a case on for you. You want to make sure you are above board, you are doing everything legal. You don't want to use their same tactics to retaliate. And you also don't want to be hesitant about seeking professional help. I've always been a pretty, self-assured person and a real, spunky little fighter since my little kid. I had to learn to do that. My mother used to recount how before I could even speak, I was chewing my brothers out for aggravating me. And so, that's just my personality, and it may be more difficult for people who don't have more of a fighting spirit. But nonetheless, you want it in both cases. You need to have an outside person who's a trained therapist who knows what they're doing. And that can be a search in and by itself, who knows what they're doing, who knows about stalking and stalking tactics, and maybe about cults too, to help you get through this process. You need a good supportive system of support, both professional support, and you need to make sure you'll find out who your friends are when you go through something like this. Like in any difficult thing you go through, you will find out who your friends are and who they are not. You just need to make sure you look for those people who are not toxic, who will help you get through this, who are very realistic in their thinking, maybe who have been through this kind of thing themselves. The other thing too, very practical things, you want to install security devices in and outside of your home. We have dash cams. Whether you're being stalked or not, this is just a good idea because of the system, the country we're living in, the culture we're living in. You want to make sure that you have security systems in your house, around your house. It's just a good thing to do because of the world we live in, but especially more so if you're finding yourself the target of being stalked by whether it's a cultist or anybody else. You also want to research your state stalking and harassment laws. You want to research also, there are federal stalking laws. They are very rarely ever enforced. Sometimes states, depending upon those states, they may or may not enforce the stalking harassment laws. And this is where it's important that you, again, you make copies of every bit of documentation. If it's a photograph, whatever it is, you document every single thing, a text message, an email, photographs of them hanging around your place of business. If you can get witnesses, that's all the better. I will say a little note about gang stalking, and that is, there is kind of a weird conspiracy thing going around about gang stalking. Like if you see a bunch of people wearing blue shirts, you know, people say, well, that's really because they're stalking you. And, you know, the police are aware of this. That's why I say document everything. Because if you're being gang stalked, which again, we've had some of my brother's cult followers harassing us in person where we lived in Connecticut. Then when we moved to Tennessee, we've had his cult followers bothering us, harassing us, showing up. And we had to let the police know about it. We show them documentation, things like that. So you have to make sure you document everything. Gang stalking does actually exist. And you have to show the police it's not the conspiracy type gang stalking, that it is the actual gang stalking. You want to beware of filling out orders of protection. A lot of times the police will tell you, well, you know, just get an order of protection, get a protective order. And they can really backfire on you, especially if you've got a really aggressive, lying cult leader, and especially if they have cult followers, they will lie up a storm against you. And the next thing you know, you've got a protective order against you, and you haven't done anything that they claimed you did. So even attorneys have told us the protective order process is broken, and they really, it can almost be a way of whacking the hornet's nest. This is not something you really want to do. Yes, protective orders in one sense give you the documentation, but if the police have already told them, or you've gotten your attorney to tell the police, or your attorney has written them a cease and desist, that is documentation enough. That is enough to tell them, you stay out of my life. And if they don't, the police must, they should enforce that cease and desist. You might have to really push for that, because sometimes the police just don't want to deal with this. And again, it goes back to the courts. The courts oftentimes don't want to deal with this either, but beware of orders of protection. And with discretion, of course, you want to inform your family, your friends. If you are the only one in kind of being stalked and everything, you want to make sure other people know about it, but you do want to exercise a certain degree of discretion about that, because not everybody is going to be understanding. Not everybody is going to be sympathetic. It could impact your job, that kind of thing. You want to be careful with that. And again, talking to an attorney. Most attorneys offer a 1-hour free consultation. You can talk to attorneys, get kind of a feel for who really understands this. A lot of attorneys now are becoming more cognizant of all of the dangers of various forms of stalking and the people who do stalk. There are some attorneys that they will not want to deal with this. They just don't want to touch it, because as we've been told by certain attorneys, what if he starts coming after me and my family? So, you know, you're in really a catch-22. You really want to find a courageous attorney who knows their business, knows the law, so that they can help you with all of the documentation you bring before them to say, what do I do? What's my next step? Let's see, social media sites. Are oftentimes, again, I mentioned about this, are oftentimes used by cultists. First of all, to get followers, to get donations, things like this. You can try to file complaints with social media sites. They are pretty bad about responding to them. Sometimes it works. My brother has been kicked off of Facebook or, you know, at least temporarily banned a couple of times, but I mean, he just comes right back. Search engines. If you're finding search engines, like at one time that happened to me, you know, page after page of search engines are coming up with really horrific things that like, you never did those things. You could, in our case, we did contact Google and tried, and we did get some things removed. There are some companies out there like Reputation Defender for a lot of money, thousands of dollars, they may be able to help you. But if you're dealing with a tech savvy stalker, then like my brother, you're going to be wasting your time and money, because they know how to hack into Google. They know how to hack into all the other search engines. And so I would be wary about that sort of thing. And a good attorney who knows about your constitutional free speech rights will tell you, as attorneys do for us, look, he's a limited purpose public figure. You've got a right to speak out against this. You've got a boatload of documentation. Let's just publish that. Again, this is as a public warning. This is a public interest type of situation. And yeah, you're going to have to throw out some money for a good attorney to review everything and get a website up defending your name and reputation. If you're on social media, you can do it that way. And oftentimes attorneys told us, my sue happy brother, again, sued me 9 times. He lost every single lawsuit. He filed the same kinds of abusive lawsuits against his ex-wife, against her husband, her second husband, and against a church that he'd once belonged to. There's nothing that's going to stop somebody from suing you. You want to make sure you've got every bit of truth and facts on your side. And again, because our broken court system, many judges will allow the most ridiculous, abusive lawsuits to go through. There are states that are trying to cap that, to try to address the problem. Sometimes they require bond to be placed. If your attorney says, look, this guy is abusive, this is a completely meritless lawsuit. If you're not going to dismiss it on the spot, then at least demand that they pay a bond to cover your legal expenses. And oftentimes there are judges now who are starting to do that. It's basically what I call the put up or shut up law. Florida has that, for example. California, Texas, I believe Nevada has that as well. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing that right. If anybody's from Nevada, sorry. So these are the kinds of things that you need to be aware of, that a good attorney will tell you what the pitfalls are of speaking out and defending your own name and reputation, and warning the public about these kinds of people, because again, you're usually not the only person affected by them. Recovering from being stalked by cultists. How am I doing on time, by the way? Anybody? 8 minutes. Okay. I'll finish this up then. If you're battling suicidal ideas because of the aggressive stalking tactics being used against you, reach out, dial 988, do something. You do not want to give your oppressor that power over you. Remember, they are getting their jollies doing this to you. You want to break that. They do not want you getting the truth out about them. They do not want you fighting back. You choose to fight back. You want to limit your time on social media, because I mean, studies after study has shown for both children and adults, the more time you spend on social media, the more depressed you can get. It can really ramp up your anxiety, ramp up your insecurities, things like that. You want to also reject any negative self-talk. You are not the fault for why this is happening. You are not the fault for why this is happening. Okay, so you want to reject any negative self-talk, like, oh, gee, I'm such an idiot. How could I, all that. You want to reject that. And again, this is where working with a good therapist, having really good friends, family members who can support you through this. You want to reject any negative self-talk, and you want to basically learn to take care of yourself. Oftentimes we may bury ourselves in things and we get all this nervous energy into doing other things. You want to make sure you're giving good quality time to taking care of yourself. Developing practical things like healthy eating practices, healthy exercise habits, healthy breathing exercises. That can help with your blood pressure when it goes up. It can help you to maintain that calm. These are physical things that you can take control of. And you also don't want to isolate yourself. A lot of these conferences that we have, we talk about the danger of isolating. You're embarrassed, you have shame. It's like, well, I don't want to burden anybody. You need to reach out. This is an extraordinarily bad thing that's happening to you, and you do not want to isolate yourself. You want to reach out to other people, and you want to reach out to the appropriate people, people who can help you. And you also want to practice good quality time alone with yourself. You perhaps journaling. Some people I know, they just make recordings of themselves. It's kind of self-talk. Anything that will help you to get through this, and also make sure you're spending good quality time with yourself and engaging in good self-care. You want to be realistic. You don't want to put excessive demands on yourself. You want to be realistic about the trauma that you're going through, because this is like if you got diagnosed with a serious illness, or you were in a wartime situation in a country that, you know, has had the war declared. This is a serious, significant trauma, and you need to make sure you're dealing with it realistically. I've met with people, some of my students were in abusive situations, and, you know, being a mandated reporter, you have to call on that, and they would minimize it. You don't want to minimize what's happening to you. And in a way, you want to kind of step back and say, if somebody came to me and told me this, what would I say to them? And you want to kind of self-talk your way through this to say, yeah, this really is bad. This really is happening, and I need to deal with it appropriately. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. Do not isolate yourself. You want to just accept the reality that at this point, just like if you were diagnosed with a certain like disease like MS or something like that, you need to make sure you're accepting that reality. And that means in the case of being stalked, or just, I think the way our culture is with the crime problems we have, depending on where you live, more or less, you want to practice vigilance. You want to practice, that's part of good self-care. You kind of just look around, you kind of put your feelers out, and you just practice that vigilance. You also want to read books and articles from other people who have gone through the same or similar type of experiences, because they can give you insight if they've already gone through that. It's kind of like when new recruits go out into the front lines, they talk to the like well-seasoned soldiers who are there. It's the same idea. You reach out, you read through articles, you contact people. ICSA has some great resources. So I think, again, I will encourage you. You will get through this storm. If this is happening to you, or you know someone this is happening to, it takes forever and a day, it feels like, and every day feels like an eternity, but you will get through it. You build that stamina and that strength, and you really address these issues with yourself to say, okay, here's what I need to do. And this is real life, and I can't just deny reality. I've got to deal with this. And there are people out there who definitely can help you out. And then pay it forward, because there's going to be a time when, even though the triggers may go off, you are there to help other people through another set of circumstances very similar to your own. So one coworker told me, you know, I said, well, you know, I wish these kinds of things had never happened. And she said, Paulette, you wouldn't be the person you are now unless you'd had to go through this. And again, all the things that you have gained insight on, that you need to acknowledge that in yourself, that you've gained insight. It's a painful process, but it's there. You can make it turn on itself, and you can benefit from it. It doesn't seem like that when you're going through it, but it will. You got to be determined to look ahead, to say, I will get through this.